and we'll get going on that note. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our May webinar. Time is flying. It's really crazy. We are very fortunate this morning to be able to share the stage with our colleagues from STS, Sectional Title Solutions. And we've also got Michael with us. He's the Managing Director of Bright Light Asset Management and the founding member of Bright Light. STS has kindly invited him to join our session this morning. I'm going to hand over to Carl to make some announcements, and then Carl will hand back over to me to introduce our co-host a little bit more, and then Rizaar will be taking you through the presentation this morning along with Michael. Please feel free to pop any questions that you might have into the chat. Alternatively, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. If you've got some background noise, please do remember to mute yourself. If not, you're more than welcome to participate. So on that note, Carl, do you want to start off for us?
Thanks, Linda. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Just a few marketing announcements. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and it will be published on our YouTube channel and website, as well as it will also be a copy of the recording will also be emailed to you. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to our newsletter. This way you can keep in touch with the TVDM consultants team. Then don't forget to register for Zelinda's online exclusive use area paid for event with guest speaker Mika de Villiers from Concealed Concept, and this will be happening next Tuesday, the 20th of May. And then lastly, our neighborhood live discussion will also be happening Friday, the 30th at 9 a.m. Please note that this feature is only available to paid for members, and if you would like to upgrade your current package, then please reach out to me. Thank you. That's all the announcements I have for today, and I'll hand back to Zelinda.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm sure that the name Sectional Title Solutions is a household name. Thank you so much, Liesel, for working with us today on the session, and to your team, who we got to meet a little bit more the other day when we were invited to one of your team sessions. Super, super grateful for that. I mean, Sectional Title Solutions are synonymous with a lot of different services in the industry. I'm just having a look at your website just to make sure that I get everything right. But you work in funding and treasury, legal advisory, efficient energy, which we're going to be talking about today, outdoor advertising, smart technology, water management solutions, some really great things in the industry. I was looking at some of your core values, community, always a fantastic one. The fact that you are dynamic, you enjoy collaborating, which is awesome, and what we're doing today, that you have built trust amongst yourselves and your community, and that you strive to excel. Really, really great features for any company in our industry, in our community space. So thank you very much, Liesel, for the opportunity of working with you guys. Michael, you're going to be chatting with us today, and I mentioned you're the Managing Director of Bright Light Asset Management, and you've got a whole bunch of very fancy qualifications, including an MBA, and you've worked with a lot of really big projects, commercial, industrial, residential across South Africa. And what you aim to do as part of Bright Light's mission is to deliver tangible financial savings and to play your part to promote sustainability and support energy independence. And you achieve this by deploying renewable energy assets, including solar and battery storage systems. So a lot of people tell us, oh, you know, the solar issue is now dead in the water. You either have it or you don't. I think it's still very much alive and well. And there's so many interesting things that you can do with solar. For those of you that follow us personally, you'll know that we're almost completely off the grid in my private home. And my husband is now using the additional power to mine Bitcoin and other forms of whatever Bitcoin is called, I don't know, other forms of mining. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And the machinery that he purchases from all overseas gets smaller and smaller and generates more and more cryptocurrency. There we go. I forgot the word, cryptocurrency. Who would have thought that a couple of solar panels stuck on the roof would be able to mine cryptocurrency? We were also very fortunate to have Philip from NABA come out to make sure that all these solar panels weren't going to cause the roof to cave in on our heads, which was very exciting. So it's really interesting stuff, I find. But we'll chat about that a little bit more. Rizaar, would you like to kickstart us off? And Michael, I've allowed you to be co-host so that you can share on your side.
Thank you, Zelinda. So, who would you like to start with?
Would you
Michael,
like to?
I'll
Sorry.
hand over to you. So, I mean, you've prepared the slides, so maybe if you can share on your side and then we can run from there.
Perfect. Thank you. So, morning, everyone, and looking forward to hopefully leaving you with some insights into the solar industry within community schemes. I'm just going to share my screen.
Got it.
Have you got it? All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. And so thanks again, Zelinda, and to the team for putting this together, Liesel as well from our side. Really pleased to be able to present really what we see as a very important aspect within community schemes. So whilst this presentation will be somewhat an introduction into Bright Light from a credibility perspective for the presentation, the majority of the presentation aims to leave the participants of the webinar with some insights that we've gained since we started the business in 2017. So hopefully by the end of the webinar, you walk away with some of the lessons learned and things to look out for when trying to implement solar within community schemes. So in the last annual integrated report from CSOS, or the Community Scheme Ombud, it was revealed that there's 70,000 community schemes within South Africa. So unfortunately, most of those schemes actually lack access to funding, but more specifically access to solar solutions within community schemes. And that's really the missing piece of the puzzle that Bright Light has played in providing these solutions. So typically our clients are all community schemes, and we typically provide this on a power purchase agreement, and that's how we've been able. That's how those community schemes have been able to achieve that, and we'll discuss that in more detail a little later. And maybe just as a last section of the introduction is that, according to the Training Academy for Community Schemes, or TRACS, it provides a detailed definition of what community schemes, and I'm guessing most people on this webinar understand what that means. But maybe just to highlight, that includes sectional title schemes, share blocks, homeowners associations, housing schemes for retired persons, etc. But what is notable is that in 2023, 55% of all homes that were sold were actually sectional title property. So it's a large proportion of the residential markets, and why it's such an important aspect for those customers to be able to access the solution. So I felt it maybe just spending a quick introduction into Bright Light from a credibility perspective, to give you a sense of where we've come from and how we've been able to provide these solutions. We essentially have been established since 2017 and manage 5 funds, which is where we've raised the capital for these solutions. We've allocated 650 million rands worth of solar assets within community schemes. We have a broad geographical reach over more than 200 customers throughout South Africa, everywhere from Cape Town to Gauteng to Ballito. So we have a broad understanding of what solar means for different geographical regions. We've deployed roughly 25 megawatts of solar, and more recently we have deployed 21 megawatt hours of battery storage within community schemes. And maybe just to add that we also currently manage roughly 4,000 geyser controllers, which is an interesting concept, which isn't really covered today, but is important for community schemes in terms of managing their load. So from just to set the scene as to the experience and the credibility, when we delve into the solar for community schemes, I think it was just important to set the background that we have. So really, why would you choose solar for your community scheme? And I love sharing this graph. I think it sells itself for why anyone would want to implement solar within their community scheme. Our mission at Bright Light has always been to provide savings for community schemes. Not only are they not necessarily able always to access solar solutions due to a lack of funding, but the fact is that many community schemes are desperate for savings given the way electricity tariffs have just escalated. So whilst there's maybe other factors which I'll get into now, but the primary purpose of why you would put solar into a community scheme is to generate savings for that community scheme. We maybe just to add, initially when we started, we were doing solar only installations, which provided a limited saving. But more recently, we've only been doing solar and battery storage installations, which increases the savings that we're able to provide to customers. And typically we can get up to 50% savings depending on the type of, for those customers, depending on the type of installation and municipality that we install these solutions on. The second reason that you'd probably want to consider solar is probably a more obvious reason, and that's the fact that you want to be able to provide load shedding solutions and energy security for community schemes. So we've seen this over and over in the last 6 to 12 months, where we've provided community schemes with battery storage solutions. So whilst we may feel that load shedding is a thing of the past or a distant memory, there's definitely, what we are seeing is a lack of infrastructure is causing more and more outages within various municipalities, and energy security is going to be more of a it's going to be less about load shedding and more about outages that we are seeing from time to time. So over the years since 2017, we've had a lot of queries about solar and what it can and can't do. So and there's been several misconceptions which we've listed a few of them to hopefully assist this discussion. The first is that we always get the comment that solar and battery systems are too expensive and that it's unattainable for the community schemes and not worth the investment. So I think whilst that is true in terms of the capital cost, what the missing piece in this discussion is the fact that there's these funded solutions that community schemes are able to access that provide an opportunity for them to be able to access it. So for example, a typical community scheme like this, and this one typically in Ekurhuleni, spending 10 million rand within that community scheme provides them access to solar and battery storage solutions, which and at a discount to the current tariff. So the argument that it's too expensive, whilst accurate, it does need to be considered when there are funding options available for community schemes. The second myth that we come across is we can only back up common property. That used to be the number one reason why we would only put battery storage in to do the lights and the common property and the guardhouse and the security systems. And that again is something that isn't entirely accurate, because for example, in a state like this where we've got 1,440 units, the entire state is backed up. There's load management to say it's specific loads that we provide support to, or it's just common property. This particular estate is entirely supplied during load shedding or on outage from the battery storage system. So again, that myth that we can only do common property is something that doesn't necessarily, it isn't in fact accurate to say. And again, I think some of the obvious things are, the solar only works when the sun is shining, and whilst again that is technically true, what we may be forgetting is that that we are able to add these battery storage solutions to save the excess energy. So the best way I felt we could demonstrate that this is not entirely true, that it's not in fact true or correct to say that it provides solar just during the day, is a typical scheme that we have that's got battery storage. That's a typical daily profile. This was particularly on 9th of Feb. And obviously this is a good example to use, but it's really just about the principle. This was their daily load on the 9th of Feb and throughout the day. And this is the amount of energy that we provided to that particular scheme. We in fact provided, sorry, let me go back. We provided almost all the required energy that community scheme needed for that particular day from our solution. So when we say that the solar only works when the sun is shining is technically correct, but we are storing that energy and discharging that throughout an entire day to assist the scheme, not only from energy security, but again, the primary purpose to create savings. So what we thought would be helpful for the discussion is just creating a solar blueprint. And really, if you are a trustee or a director in an HA or some maybe a managing agent, that you'd want to be able to work through what we consider a solar blueprint. And we've put together some points that should be considered when you are considering solar for a community scheme. So it really starts up front where we talk about the design stage or really the initial scoping of that particular project. And what we see many times is that, number one, the design is inappropriate. And it's inappropriate from a perspective of the sizing of the solution is not accurate. We see many times that either the solar or battery storage is either too much or too little, and it doesn't really serve the purpose or achieve the outcomes that a community scheme would be looking to do. So it really is important to get the appropriate sizing of the solution, and more specifically the product selection and what that product is supposed to be doing for that community scheme. You then have some practical considerations. And again, this comes through from our experience over many, many years. We initially, and we could share that experience with everybody, is that we started our installations, for example, on rooftop. And more recently, I would say in the last 12 months, we've exclusively provided carport structures for the solar. And the reason for this is that some of the projects are now reaching 7-8 years in terms of their life cycle, and many of those body corporates are now needing to implement their 10-year maintenance plan, and maintenance on the roofs need to take place, and we have to remove panels, they have to do the maintenance, and then we have to relocate the panels back. So it really isn't, it's an inconvenience both for the community scheme and ourselves to really place those panels on the roof when we are able to provide an additional benefit with carport structures, which really doesn't bother anyone when we need to do maintenance, for example, or when there's roof maintenance that needs to take place. So practical implementation of where these solutions should be placed is an important consideration.
Michael, if I could
also,
I can just interject and stop you there, just on this practical implementation, for my own note-taking purposes. So you would say that, from what I'm hearing, you would say that it would be advisable to go with the carport option as opposed to the roof option because of this maintenance responsibility.
Absolutely. So both maintenance of the body corporate's responsibility, maintenance of the roofs, but also remember, of course, we've got to maintain these assets. And for example, cleaning the panels, we need to then access the roofs. That's a health and safety risk for not only our team, but also remembering, of course, there's a responsibility on the body corporate as well to make sure that the contractors comply with health and safety regulations. So if they're having to climb on the roof and it's a double story, triple story, there's working at heights requirements that they need to comply with. And therefore, in our view, it's much more, just makes more sense to be putting it on a carport structure than it does a roof. We've also had issues where, the roof tiles have shifted, and for example, it really then removes any kind of situation where we need to climb on the roofs. Obviously, if there's no space for carport structures, our second option is to go on the roofs. But if there's space, our primary motivation is to put it on carport structures. Yeah. So one thing that we certainly look at and would ask the question of community schemes is, are they future-proofing these solutions for the long term? These are assets that need to be considered in the long term. Typically, some of these warranties are for the battery storage is 10 years and the solar panels are 25. So you really are trying to make sure that the technology that you are implementing is future-proofing these solutions. So is the solution capable of exporting? So maybe just to give you some insights, in Cape Town, some of our body corporates, we currently export to the city of Cape Town, and we share in those savings with all those export revenue with the body corporate. And we're able to do that because of the solutions that we've implemented allow us in the ability to do that. So really making it export capable, because the energy market is changing so much. And then EV ready. So we're starting to look at, for example, the implementation of electric vehicle charging stations. If we think 5 to 10 years from now, I'm not sure anyone can really say how many electric vehicles will be in use, but there's certainly going to be some. And the question is, how are we catering for this infrastructure that needs to go into body corporates? I use the example, are we going to use an extension cord from unit 214 to run it all the way down to our car and try and charge the car, in the carport structure where the car is sitting? And it's really just that silly example is what we are suggesting that we should start considering for in the long term. And then at the initial stage, really, appointing the right contractor. So, Bright Light being the funder who raises the funding and allocates the capital to these community schemes, we appoint contractors to implement these solutions. And we've certainly seen from our experience that if you're not appointing the right contractor, you can pick the best products and you can pick the best design or create the best design. But if you're appointing the wrong contractor, you really are going to ask for trouble in terms of what the final product that you're looking to achieve. So, you're looking at things like experience and accreditations and compliance. We've all seen the articles around compliance around solar within, doing the rounds in the news. And so compliance from that contract is particularly of importance.
Michael, and I do just see a question in the chat box here. Sandy, I have noted your question, but I do think Michael deals with that later in the presentation. So Sandy's asking, could you please clarify rental versus purchase options? And I assume you can discuss PPA option.
Yeah, it's the very next point, or very next slide that I'm going to be addressing now. And so, so that brings us to how would we contract, or how could a community scheme contract for some of these solutions? So there's really three options, or I guess there's maybe one or two more, but the most popular ones are really power purchase agreements, which is essentially it's a third party investing in the infrastructure or the solar solution for a community scheme, who then buys the generated electricity at a determined rate over a long term contract, so 20 to 25 years. That's what we see typically. And the pros and cons of a solution like that is, the obvious one is there's no upfront capital that's required from the body corporates. You can have predictable electricity costs because you can secure the escalation of those costs over a long period. And all the ongoing costs, I think this is a big part that is missed by many is that the ongoing cost, so the insurance and maintenance of that solution, is not borne by the body corporate. This is the responsibility of the power purchase provider. So those are really the pros. And so we've seen comments around related to power purchase agreements around some of the cons, is that it's a long-term agreement, and that the community scheme feels like it's a too long the time frame is too long for a commitment. And my argument is, well, when you sign up for Eskom, how long are you signing up for? It's indefinitely. You don't have a period that you sign up for. So I'm not sure that that's something that, or I guess as we become more familiar with these solutions, that's becoming less and less of an issue. That's just one of the points that has been raised in the past. The second obvious one is you could purchase it outright. So the body corporate could take, I don't know, reserve funds, or they could raise a special levy and they could raise funds. The pros of this is that they get the full ownership of that solution. There'll be no monthly, they get the maximum savings possible, because obviously they own it, and there would be a financial return or payback period that would be attached to it. Some of the cons of that is that you've got this high initial capital outlay, so it can cause some kind of financial strain, especially if you're raising special levies. And to be honest, in the years that we've been doing this, we haven't had one community scheme actually purchase, or we haven't seen one in our environment purchase it outright. I think there's just too much risk from, if you're going to own it and manage and insure it as well. It just doesn't make sense typically for a body corporate, but that option obviously is available. What is something of that's fairly new is an energy management contract, and it's slightly different, it's similar in many ways to the power purchase agreement, but there are some slight nuances. Again, there's no upfront capital for the body corporate. There'd be no operational and performance risk for that particular body corporate, and really the incentives are aligned with the provider. So what that means is the savings and performance are really aligned to both parties. So the funding provider would be having to perform to ensure the system performs in order to generate any kind of income, and that then also translates into greater savings for the community scheme, which really aligns the interests of both parties. And those are all the common options that we see available to community schemes.
Michael, and on that point, there's a question in the chat box. How would insurance work for the rental option? Can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, so if a funder is providing the capital to deploy these solutions, they would typically take the insurance out on these assets and wouldn't be the responsibility of the community scheme. If the community scheme or the body is going to purchase the facility themselves, they would need to ensure that the asset is insured under the body corporate insurance. So it really depends on who owns the asset, who's provided funding for that asset. And if the community scheme has provided funding, they would need to cater the insurance. If it's a funding provider, typically they would make sure that it's insured and secure.
Okay.
The last point is often not spoken about, is really the operations and maintenance of these solutions. So there's a couple of aspects. So remembering, of course, this asset you want to ensure is performing at its optimal best. So daily monitoring is critical for these solutions in order to maximize your investment. If you turn around at the end of the month and you look back and the solar hasn't performed for half of the month, that's half of the month of opportunity and savings that you've lost. For example, we have a team dedicated to monitoring these solutions on a daily basis, in order to ensure maximum system availability and uptime purely to maximize that investment. So if that's something that does need to be considered, there's also the annual inspections that need to take place, and really the important part of that is if you're not doing these, you potentially voiding your warranty on many of your products. So, for example, you might feel that you're buying a 10-year warranty for an inverter, but if you go look at the T's and C's, if you're not performing annual maintenance, when it comes time to when that inverter, for example, potentially fails, they're going to ask you questions around, okay, well, show us the maintenance records that you've conducted for these assets or for this inverter to ensure that it's been well maintained. So it is important that aspects like annual inspections take place on these solutions, which is a more detailed investigation, obviously, than just the daily performance monitoring. And then lastly is the cleaning. So I've put together a few slides to show you how bad what it can look like before and after. That's on a body corporate here in Tshwane in Pretoria. And if you're not cleaning it, that's the difference of what it would look like for a community scheme. So they can really impact your performance, as much as what we've seen, certainly up to 20%. So again, if you've done a financial calculation of performance, and that's how you, as the community scheme, are going to pay back the solution, and you're not maintaining or cleaning those panels, you're going to have to ensure that the cost of cleaning, which is something that we obviously do with our assets, is included in this process.
Can I just jump in there for a second? This daily monitoring thing, I mean, I'm very interested to hear from you, other than through your guys' company, how bodies, corporates would actually deal with that daily monitoring.
Sure.
Like, what would your advice be? From our personal home, I mean, my husband's on his cell phone almost every 5 minutes looking at the performance of the solar, and then he'll dash into the garage and come back out and tell me to switch something off or not use something or whatever. It's actually very,
Sure.
very interesting how, if you're really on top of it, it really does generate excessive amounts of savings and things like that. It's almost like a bit of a hobby at the moment. And the cleaning thing was also very interesting. I thought he was a Looney Tune when he bought a adjustable sprayer thingy to start spraying the solar panels. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing? And when he explained it to me, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. And then I feel like I've also heard that it is possible for the solar panels to get too hot. I don't know how true that is or not. So I'd like your input.
Yeah, so Linda, so thank you. There's three aspects you raised. The first is the monitoring. So typically, there's a platform just like your husband uses that would be able to monitor the performance, and that's the same principle we apply. We've obviously got slightly more sophisticated tools that provide more holistic insights into these, but the native embedded app that comes with your inverter would be good enough to monitor the performance. But again, it takes someone looking at it on a constant basis to ensure that performance is there. So what we typically do is we make that app available to the trustees so that and what we typically see is in the first week or two of operation, we can see them looking at the app and the activity, and after that it kind of falls away. But it is available, and that's one way to monitor that daily activity. From a cleaning perspective, you're 100% right. It's imperative that the cleaning takes place, and we've seen certain areas where, for example, different environments, they call it soiling on panels, and it impacts the performance. So the soiling factors are different in different environments. Some areas we need to do more cleans per year than, say, some other areas, and environmental factors can really play a big factor into determining how those panels are cleaned. And then lastly, yes, so I don't want to get too technical, but solar panels have a temperature coefficient, which really means that, and if you look at any panel, you can look at the temperature coefficients on the back of the label, and each panel will have been designed that as the temperature increases, the performance output decreases. So I guess to give it another, or maybe put it differently, less technical, is just like your laptop or your cell phone, like any electronics, as soon as it starts getting hot, performance reduces. And so, yes, if panels, or if the daily temperature increases, so the temperature coefficient decreases, and that performance is impacted on systems. So yeah, I know it's counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. And that's why we see, for example, best performing times of the year, typically in the high fault, is around October, when it's not too hot, but you've got good sunshine as well. So you get that good mix of the right temperature with the sunshine to get the performance of these systems. Yeah, so again, standing on panels like that is going to avoid the warranties, which we see many times happening, you know, and really, again, using the right tools to clean these assets. So it really comes back to where I guess the concern that we would like to highlight is, you know, avoiding the warranties of these solutions. When you stand on a panel, you actually you cause micro cracks in the panels, and that's something that you want to avoid, because that impacts the long-term performance. We felt that there's a number of risks that we just want to highlight when considering solar. So the slide is described as staying covered. So there's a couple of elements that we need to consider, and the first is the technology risk. So within technology, you've got the equipment failure. So again, if you've bought these assets and the equipment failed, it's essentially the same as buying a car and letting it sit in the workshop getting fixed. You can't use the asset, it doesn't work, yet you're still paying for it. So that's really an important component, is that if you buy in the wrong products, you get this equipment failure, and so that impacts the performance of these systems. Then you've got system performance risks. So if the system doesn't perform, again, I use the example of a car. It said it's going to go 200 k's an hour, but it's only going 100. You have this underperformance that impacts the solution, and really is a significant risk. And then, yeah, again, it speaks to outdated technology. Really, if we aren't engaging in the latest technology, just, I guess, like your cell phone, it becomes redundant pretty quickly. And that's why that really does need to be considered. So we've also provided, how would you mitigate those risks? So, you know, if you select the proven technologies with well-established brands with a strong track record, then you're mitigating much of that risk. Regular maintenance is an obvious one, you know, to mitigate the system performances. And as we said earlier, future-proofing your solutions with the right technology, with modular systems, meaning that you can easily supplement or augment the existing systems in the future. And that's what we've been doing, is that systems we implemented in 2019, for example, we're now going back and adding solar and battery storage to the same systems, and able to integrate that all into the same system, or the same solution. Sorry, I've been clicking through the slides, so apologies, you've missed exactly what I've just said. So the equipment failure, the system performance, the outdated technology, and mitigating that is choosing or selecting proven technologies, the regular maintenance, and future proofing. So apologies for that. But the next point is the regulatory risk. We've seen this in the news.
Sorry, Michael, I think you've stopped sharing.
Have I?
Yeah.
No, we can still see the slides.
You can still see. Oh,
You can
weird.
see on
Okay.
my side, yeah.
All right, sorry, ignore me. I'll click something.
And so regulatory risks, we've seen that in the news quite often. So maybe just to touch on that, typically this is the small scale embedded generation, or SSEG. So it's a long-winded way of just talking about the registration processes that we've seen in the news. You know, non-compliance with these systems, operating without those registrations and approvals from the local municipality as a risk. We've seen City of Cape Town, for example, issue penalties and fines, and not only City of Cape Town, but Eskom as well. And then what I think more appropriate for community schemes is the right approval process. Whether you choose the right process to approve these systems within the community scheme through either AGM, SGM, and PMR 29.2 in terms of 30-day notice. Those are regulatory and compliance risks. But again, we've provided how do we mitigate that? You would look at engaging with an accredited contractor. I spoke about the choice of contractor is so important to ensure that you comply with all the required requirements from SSCG perspective. Staying informed in terms of the Electricity Act, for example, has changed, I think, 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. So, staying informed about changes to legislation and specifically with NERSA. And then document management, keeping all the compliance documents, the certifications, and more specifically the approval process that was followed. Typically, I guess the managing agents would handle that when they go through an AGM or SGM, but really important to keep that documentation of the approval process, especially if you're going to look back in 5, 6, 7 years' time as to how this decision was taken at that point. Insurance risks, which we have had our fair share within our own portfolio, so it's only fitting to present that to this webinar. Roof damage during installation, so not necessarily within our portfolio, but we've seen certainly pictures online to see if you're not getting a structural engineer, which is something that we do with every installation. If you're not getting a structural engineer to sign off, we've taken, with the structural engineers, we've identified certain roofs that weren't able to, and we've had to strengthen them. So that was part of the process as well, where we strengthened the roofs. Electrical issues, you've got all the potential electrical issues that come with these assets. We're now bringing battery storage systems into these areas and need to make sure that, from an electrical installation perspective, that you meet the required standards. Theft and vandalism, we see that probably more often than we should in community schemes where vandalism, we've seen stones thrown on, we've seen a whole bunch of other items, and we've seen some theft as well. So, I guess that's why we have insurance, but it needs to be considered that impact of theft increases premiums and really impacts many other aspects with regards to insurance. And then, general damage, hailstorms and windstorms. We haven't seen much hail damage in the years we've been operating. We've probably seen more golf ball damage than we have hailstones. So just a funny example is that there's a driving range next to one of the body corporates, and clearly those golfers need a lot of practice because they keep hitting the balls onto the solar panels. So general damage is definitely something that takes place. How do you mitigate that? Updated insurance policies to cater for these solutions. In certain cases, you may want specialized coverage, on these renewable energy assets, which means an additional cost that you would need to take out. Obviously, from a security perspective, our insurers, for example, are now requiring CCTV cameras on our battery solutions to ensure that we have not, besides the CCTV that may be present in a community scheme, they want their own independent CCTV on some of the assets within a community scheme. So we're having to implement that. And then the roof assessments, as I mentioned, if you're not getting a structural, by law, you have to get a structural engineer to sign off the structure that this solar is going to be implemented on. But, you really don't want to be following a path that leads you to a collapsed roof structure. So the roof assessments, the sign-offs by the structural engineer, and then all the mitigation that goes with that is important. Safety risks. So you got battery storage and battery fires. We've seen that in terms of what we've seen on online and in the news, and what can happen with those battery fires is quite significant. We've got the obvious ones where if you're not doing the right installation, you can get faulty wiring, which poses as electrical shocks, and then access challenges. So many times, what we've certainly come to learn, and I say learn because we didn't know it ourselves either when we started with these battery solutions, but also access challenges. So what that means is, if you're going to choose a location for the battery storage, how easy is it accessible for the firefighting team that needs to come in if there is? If you're placing it under, let's say, under the stairs or in a cupboard somewhere where it's inaccessible, that's going to cause a problem or when it comes time to actually access it. So, from an OSHAC perspective, it is important that those elements are catered for. So, from mitigating that, what we do certainly is look at, again, accredited and certified installers. Work with those professionals who always follow the best practice for these installations. Very important, for example, on a battery storage system to make sure there's proper ventilation and safety measures on that battery system. In all our systems, we include fire suppression. It is critical that fire suppression technologies are deployed in these environments. And then the safety protocols. So you can mitigate those risks by ensuring the emergency shutdown procedures are in place, and that there's at least there's a standard operating procedure when these types of things happen. When things go wrong, and then annual part of our assessments on an annual basis is the audits that take place. So checking, for example, is the fire suppression still working? Is the ventilation system still working, etc. So those are ways that you could mitigate some of those risks. So getting to the last part of the presentation is what we've described as 4 wrongs don't make a right. And really what we're doing is just recapping what we spoke about. So the first thing is to really choose the right funding model that's appropriate for your community scheme, whether it's cash, PPA, energy management. Each of those options each one of those options has its own pros and cons and has its own financial outcomes that you're looking to achieve for the community scheme. So choosing the right model is critical. The second is choosing the right technology, whether it's the products, the warranties, or the contractor that you are proposing to implement these solutions. It really is crucial to avoid any costly mistakes down the line to make sure that you've chosen the right technology. Again, the right and proper legal structure is important, for approval processes, preventing unnecessary delays, but also preventing any disputes in the future. So that's critical to make sure that legal structure for these solutions is appropriate for the community scheme. And then, lastly, and probably important, is these are long-term assets. So you really want to ensure that you've chosen the right partner for these solutions. And maybe it is like a marriage, because these are such long-term contracts that you're entering into, that it is important to choose the right partner in this environment. So, yeah, I guess that's me. Thank you for your time. I've got obviously happy to answer any questions, and looking forward to seeing more and more solar solutions within community schemes.
Thank you so much, Michael. Rizaar, would you like to add on before we hand over to Q&A?
Michael, thanks very much for that. So I didn't want to chip in when you were speaking about those risk mitigation factors, but obviously from a compliance perspective and implementation, compliance with Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, that's where we would come in and we would ensure that compliance. So often what we get asked is, how do we implement solar panels? So obviously there are two avenues. So if it's an individual owner that wants to, what we'll first look at it, if it's an individual owner or only a few owners that want to install solar, then there are different methods or avenues that we can look at from a Sectional Title Schemes Management Act perspective. And the most viable option that we see, obviously, invariably these, from instructions that I've received, these solar panels are being installed on the common property roof. And of course, if you're implicating common property, then there's certain approvals that must be obtained. So what we think is the most viable option in that circumstance would then be to confer exclusive use rights to these owners. And how we do that, or the easiest way to do it would be to confer that in terms of amended conduct rule and get a special resolution from the body corporate. And then just speaking to these risk mitigation factors, we would then add that into the conduct rules. So insurance, maintenance, indemnities, all of these things we deal with in the rules so that we tie that up nicely. And then we look at the PMR 29.2 and 29.3. 29.2 if it's the scheme as a whole that wants to install solar for communal benefit. And I think that you touched on that. But I won't go into detail. I mean, if there are any questions on that, we can take from the floor. I think we do have 5 more minutes to the hour. So I mean, if there are any questions, you are more than welcome to put on your mic and we can deal with them as they come in.
Don't all jump at once. Was there some questions in the chat that we haven't answered yet? I know that Sandy confirmed the cleaning as well as Marion. There were a couple of questions that Sandy answered. It looks like Sandy has recently been through this project. It looks like she's got quite a few answers on the chat. Thanks so much, Sandy, for participating as always. Raz, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so I have a very simple question. Do you guys also deal with like actually installing the electric vehicle chargers in those things, or are we not at that point yet?
So have been exploring it. We haven't installed one yet, but we are thinking ahead as to how it would potentially look like in the future. So, for example, we're currently busy with some residential developers which are looking at how would you practically roll this out in the future. I think there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of that implementation, because it clearly hasn't been considered, and there's no question that it's going to need to have some kind of infrastructure. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
I mean, Raz, I believe that we've been receiving instructions for rule amendments and regulating EV battery installations.
Yes,
I think you recently dealt with one.
Yeah, so I've received two, and we basically drafted those rules from scratch. But it would be great outside of this, obviously, to chat with Michael if we need some guidance on that as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Michael, definitely. I think there's a lot of things that we can incorporate into our rule documents as well, based on what you've discussed. So it might be worthwhile for us to then collaborate if the need arises.
Happy to. Thank you, Rizaar.
Tony, apologies, you had your hand up and I interjected.
No, not at all. Good morning, everyone. Michael, it's been a few years since I did any research regarding your related type solutions. Now, in those instances, in the one instance, the break-even tariff of the company that came to have a look was above the Eskom tariff to this community scheme. So that was a non-starter.
Exactly.
The other two schemes, what it came down to was the big question. It wasn't the point of the savings, which is what yours and similar peer companies are promoting. It was in the instances where insufficient power was being generated, the cash flow impact on the project or the installation was insufficient to service, be it the loan or be it the service level agreement rental. The rental. So in those instances, I've come across a couple of other managing agents that have said the body corporates were then raising special levies to cover the working capital cost. So that's the big risk, and I don't think this industry has matured to understand that financial risk of the proposed or intended savings versus the costs versus the power generation. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, Tony, it's a
deep risk.
Tony, it's an excellent point because we navigate this all the time within the business as to, seeing the different models being presented to community schemes. My personal view is it shouldn't be a fixed monthly charge or some type of rental, because we've seen it time and time again. Affordability becomes a problem for community schemes. And it's why we've chosen the route we have, where we link it to a tariff. We think that's the most appropriate, because it aligns the interests of both parties, both the community scheme and the funder, in terms of performing on the asset. We don't even enter into discussions if the tariff structure is higher than the council, because again, whilst you may want the solution, affordability needs to be the primary consideration. And if you're paying more for electricity through a solar provider, it really doesn't make any sense to do so. What we saw, Tony, in 2023, when load shedding was at its height, we saw some, understandably, possibly emotional decisions by some body corporates where, it was becoming untenable, and they were wanting to enter into these fixed contracts because they wanted so much battery storage attached to it. And unfortunately, we didn't enter into, I just remember the one, because it was going to be an affordability issue down the line. Unfortunately, we didn't, because I know that would have taken place, but it's that principle. I'm a big advocate for not providing, as I said, the fixed monthly charge, and that's what we don't apply within our space. But I know there's other models, rental models. It's just my personal preference, and something that you pointed out is absolutely valid.
Have you encountered from your client base any cash flow shortfalls where they have not been able to service the rental or your charge or your price?
No, because our revenue is linked to the electricity collection that's already taken place. So there's no additional cost. We have entered into one or two, and this is why we have the experience of why this is not an option we are pushing forward with, which is the fixed charge. It's that affordability becomes an issue down the line. Any time you're having to pay more than what you're currently paying is going to become a problem. We've had to restructure particular contracts outside of that. So the experience we've had is we've had fixed contracts, and we've had to restructure them back to tariff linked, or what we consider maybe a variable charge based on the consumption.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Fantastic. Hold on. I see some in the chat. Have we dealt with the two in the chat yet? Rizaar?
Yes, we have. I
Yeah,
think there was
okay.
just one question that we haven't dealt with directly, but I think Michael touched on it. I'm just looking for it. I think Clive posed the question. Yeah. So just regarding roof integrity, I think it's obviously difficult to say from scheme to scheme, but regarding roof integrity, generally, what is the ability to sustain load over the life cycle of the solar panel?
Yeah, so I'm definitely no structural engineer, but I could just give you some of the experience that we have had. Typically, the majority of roof structures are able to carry the load. So we've only encountered very few times where we've had to do remedial work on the roof structures to strengthen them. But again, this is why you need to do that maintenance. So, you have to do these inspections and checking that over the term that the roof structures have held their integrity, that there's been no deterioration. Obviously, we get photos of each and every roof on the inside, and some of them are pretty scary in terms of what they look like and the lack of maintenance that has taken place. So, so whilst up front you might get a structural engineer to sign that roof off, I think it is critical that is an ongoing element that needs to be considered.
Awesome. we're going to end it off there. Thank you so much, Michael and Liesl and the STS team for joining us this morning. Thank you, everyone. Just a reminder that the recording will be made available on our website afterwards. I know that Carl does share a bunch of information at the beginning, and all the presentation as well as the contact details of Michael and STS will be on the website as well. Thank you so much for attending, and to those of you that are going to hop off now and join Stratafin's webinar that has started about 2 minutes ago. So enjoy and have a lovely day further and a good weekend coming up. Keep well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Linda.